and welcome back to the living room makeover. So if you missed the first video, I started by skim spackling the walls, and I very quickly realized that I needed to change direction and instead focus on what I was going to do with the trim in the living room. So we have quite a bit of wood trim already. The trim that's behind me was painted when we bought the house, and it had clearly been painted for like a very long time. So I wasn't totally sure what was under it, but the paint was in terrible condition. So no matter what, I kind of had to do something. I was gonna have to spend some time giving it some love. I ended up completely stripping all of the baseboard and like door trim, at least on this side of the room. I think I forgot to mention last time that the other side of the living room, because that wall, which I have mentioned before, had really, really bad termite damage and we had to rebuild a lot of the other side of the room. Unfortunately, the original trim on that side of the room literally was crumbling when we tried to remove it so that we could rebuild the wall. It was unfortunately unsavable. So we are replacing it and it's going to look just like the rest of the trim, but unfortunately wood that you can get these days is not going to look quite as nice as, you know, original wood trim from 100 years ago. So for that side of the room, in case you were wondering, that side of the room will have painted trim, and I'll probably paint it to sort of somewhat match the wall, just so it kind of all blends together and it looks nice. Thankfully, that's sort of like a separated side of the room, so I don't think it'll be that big of a deal. I don't think most people will really think too much about it. But this side of the room has so much woodwork already. We've got the beautiful staircase, we've got the wood beams on the ceiling, so I really, really wanted to restore this wood trim. And as you can see, I got it down to wood. Very excited. I think I spent about 20 to 30 hours stripping it down to bare wood. But now that the wood is all stripped, we can move on to sanding down the trim. So sanding will just smooth it out, but it also will get rid of any last little bits of either the stripper or any paint that's residual. I did have a few spots that were just really, really stubborn paint. And I knew that, you know, I could keep doing the stripper over and over again, but it probably would not work that well. So I left those and figured that I could just sand them down. That's where I'm at. So we've got some spots like that. We've also got some spots in like grooves that we'll have to really get in there with our hand sandpaper and dig out, because I am a little bit crazy and I need every little piece of paint gone. But yeah, that is what we are working on next. The one other thing that I am struggling with figuring out quite what to do with is the mantle. Obviously, it is beautiful, and like I mentioned in my last video, I am not planning on painting it. Don't worry, definitely don't want to paint it. But it is like, it does have quite like some wear and places that I feel like I would really love to just, you know, clean it up, make it nice and beautiful again. I kind of am tempted to darken it just a little bit. Like, I feel like if it matched the beams up here, that would be really beautiful, and it would sort of like, once we, you know, redo the walls, we paint and everything like that, it would really sort of like pop off the walls and be really beautiful if it was just like a tad darker, like closer to that color. I've done quite a few woodworking projects. I'm certainly no expert, but I'm pretty comfortable. However, you know, there's a lot of detail on this just to get around, which I'm not too worried about or anything like that, but you know, I don't want to mess it up. And unfortunately, like when I was trying to research, you know, some people who have done similar projects online, I feel like I found this old house, which had not great information, to be honest. I was a little disappointed in this old house, but everybody online just paints their mantles, which is so sad to me. I mean, do you. Like, it's not my house. You do whatever you want. But it's also like, every single one was about painting, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. I'm looking for somebody to like give me some inspiration on, restoring the sky and maybe changing the color just slightly, the stain color just slightly. If you do know of any good resources for that, I would love for you to leave them below. Like I said, I am having the hardest time finding anyone who really has even done this and then shared it online. Okay, so I have my little scrap piece of wood, which is definitely not exactly the same color as the trim in the living room. I'm not sure if that's because it got painted a lighter color, so when I stripped it, it still has some in there, or if it's a slightly different wood, which is possible. That's always one of the tricky things in old houses, is that this came from the second floor, and sometimes what some people did to save a little bit of money back in the day would be like to use really, really nice wood on the first floor and then use like a slightly cheaper wood for the trim on the second floor. It's really hard for me to say whether or not this is the exact same type of wood, and it's just like the paint had kind of like essentially like dyed it, and that's why it looks lighter, or not. So I'm not sure if this will give us a perfect like idea of what the stain will look like, but it will give us an idea of what the stain will look like. So I'm gonna put just the couple of stains that I have on hand. I did grab one like new one to try from Lowe's, and then I have some from other projects already on hand. So I'm just gonna give those a try. We're gonna put them on here, and that way we can at least just get an idea of what they actually look like on wood. Obviously, they need to dry before I make any real decisions, but I am really loving this. And this to me feels like it'll match that ceiling trim that's in the living room already that I really wanted to get close to. It's also just a really pretty color in my opinion. I love that sort of warm medium wood. This feels way too dark, too light, and yellowy. And that could work. It's not too different from that, but it's a lot lighter. So right now I'm really leaning towards this, but we will see once it dries. I can't remember if I mentioned this before, but we have this hole obviously in the trim here. What that's from is from an outlet that the previous owners just cut out and stuck it in there, which is crazy to me, but that's where the electrical outlet was when we bought the house, and we were like, no, this is insanity. So anyway, we obviously updated all of our electrical too. That's a problem that we need to fix. And so thankfully we have, throughout like the renovation of our house, whenever we've had extra pieces of this nice wood, we have saved it. So I went ahead and I stripped a few pieces that we could potentially use. And then Frank, my husband, he's gonna go ahead and sort of clean this up. It's obviously not gonna be perfect. It's not gonna be one perfect little piece. I like almost always keep a piece of furniture here anyway, so we're just gonna make it look the best that we can, and we'll put a piece of furniture back here so you probably won't really ever see it anyway. Unfortunately, I ended up being out of the house when my husband filled the hole and, set everything up. But I did go back in with wood filler. This is specifically stainable wood filler that I got, and sort of ended up just filling the whole thing over. Since the wood grain didn't match all that well to the original wood anyway, I figured that it was better to just completely cover it with the stainable wood filler. And once it was completely dry, I just used a fine sandpaper to sand it down so that it was totally flush with the original wood. So today is the day. It is time to actually stain and finish up this trim. I really debated over what stain color to go with. I do love that very end one, but it did feel like a little too different, a little too dark for this room. So I'll show you real quick up against the ceiling trim. So there you go. These are the different colors. Obviously that one on the end is nice, but it is definitely a little bit darker, and this I feel like has just a tiny bit more red to it. So I ended up testing out this one on the opposite end because I feel like that's the closest. And I mean, whenever you're talking about especially wood in our house, like every color is different. I mean, this trim is a completely different color. So you kind of just have to make the best decision that you can. There's no such thing as perfect when it comes to trim, in my opinion. So yesterday I went ahead and I tested just a small section of the trim with the stain just to see how I felt about it. And I love it. It's definitely not like a perfect match, but I really love the look of it. So it's what I decided to go with. So today we have to, you can see I already taped off everything just to keep things nice and clean, or as clean as possible. We are going to do wood conditioner first. I have learned my lesson over the years. I always try to like skip that step, but let me tell you, especially if you're working with really old wood and wood that has like been painted and has had a lot of damage over the years, do a wood conditioner. It is well worth the couple of extra minutes or an hour or whatever it takes to put it on, because it really does help. If you want a good example of that, go back and watch my video where I stained the floors in the half bath because I believe I really learned my lesson during that specific project. So anyway, let's get started. Let's put some wood conditioner on and let's get going. Guys, I cannot believe how good this looks. Like, seriously, it's one of those projects where like you spend so much time like right up on top of it, like looking at every tiny microscopic detail, and the whole time you're like, this is gonna be terrible, because you're seeing all of the teeny tiny little imperfections the entire time. But it turned out so good. Just to give you a peek, look, I mean, look at it. Oh my gosh, I still can't believe how good this doorway turned out. I really feel like this just changes the entire vibe. Like, it really does. I mentioned before that we had to patch a hole here, which you can definitely tell, but I will say that I'm happy with how well it did come out, because especially patching holes in old woodwork, like, you just never know. And like, I really thought it would stand out like crazy, crazy, crazy. And you can obviously see it here. I have not put the top coat on though yet, which does kind of like, I don't know, it kind of always makes things look a little smoother, but I am still actually pretty happy with how this came out, which maybe I'm crazy to think that, but I think anyone who has like, you know, worked on old woodwork and had to patch it in certain ways, especially a giant hole like this, sometimes you just gotta take what you can get. So I'm pretty happy with it. I think especially like when you step back, once we have the top coat on, and I mentioned this before, but like, we always have a piece of furniture there anyway, so like you'll pretty much never ever ever see it. And I really think that once everything's all said and done, you really won't even notice it until somebody points it out or somebody's like right up on top of it. And here is this doorway, which once again, I mean, look at it with the top woodwork. I just feel like it was meant for this. And I definitely, now this all has me definitely leaning towards staining the mantle the same color, because I love this color and I love how it looks with the top woodwork, and I think it would just be so gorgeous to have the mantle that color too. This is just the skim coat in case you missed that part of the last video, but so once I actually paint, I think I'm going to leave it like a very creamy white color, because I think this woodwork will just be like, it's going to be the centerpiece of this whole room. So today we just have to put on the top coat. The stain had to sit a full day and like, you know, soak in and all of that stuff, but it is ready for the top coat, the poly, and that'll like seal everything in. And I'm so excited. I think it looks so good. Going to be the most obnoxious person talking about how good this looks for like the rest of forever. Just, it looks so good, especially once I put on that top coat. Ooh, it looks so good. Anyway, there is one thing that I realized that happened in between the last video and this video that I forgot to mention. So the door between the entryway and the living room, I was originally going to leave that on, and then I was going to work on refinishing that like at the end of the living room project. But then I realized that like, hello, I need the door to be off so I could finish the trim around the door. I don't know what I was thinking. So we ended up taking it off, and it is downstairs on the table in our basement, and I'm gonna refinish it. I'm just gonna go ahead and get it done now, and especially now seeing how good all of this turned out, I'm actually really excited. Like, I was dreading it before just because I know how much work it's gonna be, but it's gonna look so good. So I think that may be what we're working on next. Maybe also the mantle at the same time. I am definitely really excited to give the mantle like a little bit of warmth and just like make it feel like it's all cohesive and part of the same room, and I just think it'll be so lovely. But we still have lots to do, so I will definitely be back soon with some more from this. I also realized that I had done a little makeover in the entryway, and for a couple reasons, like I was holding on to that footage, and now I can put it out there in the world. And so I might be like dropping that in the next week, that little like entryway mini makeover, so keep an eye out for that. But anyway, I hope you are having a lovely day, and I will see you next time.